Good morning and welcome to Norcal PTAC's webinar, How to Do Business with the Government. This is a webinar that we repeat every month to provide our clients, prospective clients, members of the public, general information on how to do business with the government. So this is an introductory webinar. I would love to just launch a poll real quick while I'm talking, just to ask, what's your experience level with contracting? So I'm going to launch that now, and I'm going to get started on my intro spiel, just talking about who we are. Please take your time answering, and we'd love to see where everyone is. That's one of the interesting things about these webinars, is everyone's coming from somewhere a little bit different. My name is James Forrest. I am a procurement specialist with Norcal PTAC. I'll talk about what PTAC is in a second. Assisting me here, Amanda Anderson is the program coordinator. Hi, Amanda.
Good morning, everybody.
So Amanda is going to be helping with the chat, helping with the Q&A, and just helping make sure things run smoothly. So thanks so much, Amanda. PTACs. These are a PTAC center is what's known as a Procurement Technical Assistance Center. Basically, what we are nonprofit centers, actually spread out across the whole country. There's 96 of us across the country, and we help businesses compete and succeed in the government marketplace. That's why we exist. Our PTAC program was created by Congress back in the 70s in order to assist small businesses to participate in the government market, because it is a complicated marketplace to get into, and without any assistance, I think the government was feeling that the large contractors were the only ones that were really able to compete and get through the red tape. And so they wanted to put some tax dollars towards a program that would help small businesses. And so that's why we exist. We actually don't charge anything for any of our services. And every center is a little bit different, but we all offer the same basic core services. We are all funded by federal, state, and local grants and contracts. And so we can provide this service to you for free. So in FY21, PTAC served over 56,000 clients and help them win more than 24 billion with a B in government contracts. And here you can see there's 7 PTACs just in California alone, plus the American Indian PTAC, which covers several states in the West. So if you're not in our service area in green here, I'll go to the next slide to show you a detailed. These are our 15 counties that we cover as Norcal PTAC, the Northern California Procurement Technical Assistance Center. Yes, it's a mouthful. Norcal PTAC's much pithier. If you're not in that service area, you can go back and find your PTAC here, but there's actually a link here. Find your local PTAC at aptac-us.org/find-a-PTAC. It's going to have a list of all the PTACs in the whole country. I also find that if you just Google your county and your state and the word PTAC, it should come up with your local PTAC center. Sometimes there's just one in a whole state if it's a less populous state. California is the most populous state in the country, so we have 7, but that's just how it is. A little more complicated to find your PTAC in California, but just feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or confusions about finding your PTAC. You do have to be in one of these counties to have a business that's registered and established in one of these counties if you'd like to work with us. So what does working with us look like? There's 3 basic core services. The first 2 we offer only to our clients, and the last one we offer to everyone. So the first thing we do is one-on-one counseling. One-on-one counseling is the bread and butter of what all PTACs do. We have a team of procurement specialists, including myself, who meet with you. For us, it's over videos, Zoom for the most part. We also do phone calls, emailing, occasional in-person meeting if the geography is right, but we have a pretty big service area here. And we go over really anything related to government contracting that you need help with. I'm going to go over some of our services in the next page, so I won't spend too much time here. We can also assign our clients a bid matching profile. This is a custom bid matching profile that's really helpful. What it does is it scrapes the whole internet, a lot of these different government contract databases for bid opportunities that match criteria that you provide for what you sell. So your procurement specialist and you sit down and figure out what are the keywords that describe what you want to sell. Are you in construction? Are you in services? What kind of, trying to be very specific, what kind of valves do you sell? Get down to that level of granularity. And then if it's working correctly, the bid matching profile will send an email into your inbox every morning with any bids that match what you sell. So that could be 0 or it could be 50, depending on how widely applicable or in demand your services are. Third thing, as I mentioned, are not just restricted to our clients, really, because as you probably know, some of you are joining from out of our service area. I heard someone from Sacramento today, which is California Capital PTAC, but anyone can join our webinars from anywhere. These are our resources and trainings. We're always putting more on. You can find more on our website at norcalptac.org. Click on the calendar, and I'll go over at least one upcoming event after the presentation today. So if you'd like to apply for our services, you need a business that's established. So it needs to be up and running, established, not a pre-venture business, located in our service area and looking for government contracting assistance, not assistance with grants, not assistance with business plans, not something else like that. So we're specifically laser focused on government contracting, which sets us apart from other business development programs, such as the SBDC, which is also a good idea if you're looking for startup assistance. I just want to note that we helped our clients win more than $500 million in government contracts last year, and I think we're set to exceed that number this year. So we're really proud of helping a lot of small businesses put money in their pockets that might have gone to a large business or out-of-state business. So that's what we're passionate about, is economic development and putting your tax dollars back in your pocket. So that's really what this is all about, and with PTAC government contracting assistance. A couple sample of some of the things that we can help with. We can help with SAM registration. We're going to talk about that. We can help with all sorts of certifications. We can help with crafting capability statements. These are all things we're going to talk about today, by the way. Market research, GovSpend, marketing government agencies, proposal review, really you name it. If it's related to government contracting, we assist with it. So anything related to federal, state, local, or even tribal government contracting. So let's not spend any more time on introductions. Let's jump into the main thing. I just want to say here, quick disclosure, the information that we're presenting today, it is accurate to the best of our ability at this time. Of course, it could change at any time. We don't get notified when things change. In fact, sometimes we just log on a session and find that a government website has completely changed, but the fundamentals of what I'm talking about shouldn't change on that scale of time. So it should be applicable, but just want to make note there. Okay, let's talk about the agenda today. So first, what is the PTAC program? We've already gone over that. So second, we're going to talk about what government contracting is, since we do oh, I didn't get to the poll. Let's go talk about this poll here. How to end poll and then share results. Okay, before we dive in the deep end here. So what's your experience level with government contracting? We've got a decent number of respondents here. No experience, more than half of you. So that's kind of what we expect. Very little experience, another 17%, and some experience, 30%. Nobody has a decent amount or rates themselves as an experienced government contractor, which is totally fine. It makes sense. You're here for an introduction webinar. That I have definitely kind of phrased this presentation to be most applicable to someone coming in from a beginner's perspective. So if there's anything that's not clear, if you want any clarification, please enter in the Q&A and I'll make it clear, but I'll try to spell out all the acronyms and sort of start from the beginning. So what is government contracting? How to determine if selling to the government is right for you. This is a really important step. Government contracting is not for everybody. You may have been told that there's millions of dollars to be made with government contracting, but a lot of businesses, quite frankly, are better off spending their time and resources pursuing success in the private marketplace. There's no lack of funds in the private marketplace. There are benefits of doing business with government, and we'll talk about those. But first, to determine if selling to the government is right for you and your business. If you do determine then that's what you want to do, then how do you get started? We're going to go over that. Very important to figure out how to market to the government. It's a very different animal from marketing yourself to the private industry, which you may have had some experience with. And where to actually find these bid opportunities. If you want to bid on public bids, where do you find them? There's no clear overview. Someone, if you're interested, someone doesn't come shake your hand and tell you where to find all these things. So that's kind of what we can do and help with. And of course, steps for success generally. So let's hop right in, starting with what is government contracting. We'll start with that, zoom even farther out. What is the government? What is a government? So a government, we like to say it's a tax-funded entity, helps administer and run our society. They're the ones that quite often pave the roads and build buildings, public infrastructure, administration, collecting taxes, providing social services, law enforcement, things like that. When people say the government, quite often in the United States, they mean the federal government of the United States, but it could be your local city, county, state, school district. It could be transportation authority, publicly owned utility entities, Native American tribal governments as well. So when we talk about government contracting, we don't just mean the federal government. We mean any branch of government at all, any sort of tax-funded entity here. And so let me tell you a little bit of a story about the trajectory of government contracting over time. It used to be that a lot more of what the government did, what they needed to get done, was done in-house by government employees, who were paid government employees. For example, we're going to go pretty far back here to World War II. Just a quick example here, ships during World War II were largely built by the government itself rather than contracted out. So the government shipyards like the Brooklyn Naval Yard, 75,000 government employees on that one shipyard alone, building ships to go in World War II. Now, the reason that sounds impressive, at least to my ears nowadays, is because things like that are generally done by contractors nowadays. Now, they also had contractors in the private industry that were contracting with the feds in World War II, but really the scale of what they contract out today has grown astronomically. And so, warships are generally built by private contractors who are hired on by the federal government, and not on the payroll for Uncle Sam, but as a third party through a contract. And those contracts can get real complicated. So this is actually the overall trend in the last decades, maybe even in the last century. As the size of the federal government has grown, which you may have heard or understood that the federal government is growing, actually what's being done by government employees is less and less every year. More of this money that's coming from our taxes and going to the government is actually going back to private businesses. So when you pay taxes, you're a lot of the times you're supporting the private industry who's in government contracting. So the same has been true for the local and state governments as well. So for instance, it used to be when the government needed an expert, they trained an expert or they found an expert and hired them. Now, more often than not, they'll hire a consultant. And by hire, I mean contract with them. There's a lot of freelance consultancies that have had a meteoric rise in government contracting, for instance. So this is one example of a kind of industry that's had a lot more success in government contracting in recent decades. This is where you come in because there's a lot of services the government needs. So let's look on this page here. The top row is some really commonly procured ones. So for instance, you can see there's the guy with the jackhammer. We're talking about public works construction, building bridges and roads and things like that. Janitorial services, cleaning. We've got fire response teams, office supplies, and on the bottom we've got some things that might surprise you a little bit, might not come to your mind immediately when you think of government contracting, but there are definitely opportunities for them, such as moving services, packing services, transportation, logistics, dog food, dog treats, dog collars, things for canine units. And USDA buys fruit and vegetables on occasion. And rarely, but it does happen, the government even rents goats. So goats eat a lot of grass, they can eat shrubbery and brush that you want cleared out. That's a lot easier than paying a human to do it with a lawnmower and a weed whacker. So they even rent goats. So there really is quite a broad array of opportunity in the government marketplace, but you do want to be judicious about estimating your odds of having success, because some things are going to be harder than others. If you have, if you have goats, you may not want to build your entire business model around contracting. And so that's something we'll talk about today, is just trying to be realistic about your fit with government contracting. So there are more appropriate and less appropriate industries for government contracting. So some of the more appropriate ones, these are just for example, these lists are by no means exhaustive. It exists on a spectrum. Public works, A&E construction, like we mentioned, very common. Professional services, the big category that includes a lot of things like consulting and environmental review. Office supplies, janitorial, as we mentioned. IT, information technology, this is a huge one. Of course, that's commonly procured. They need a lot of external IT firms and goods, hardware. It's a big information technology network out there that runs all different levels of government these days. Medical suppliers and technology, transportation logistics, fire suppression services, and of course, defense. So these are all, if you're in this industry, you've got some experience, you have a much higher chance of having success in the government marketplace. These are some of the go-to categories. Typically less appropriate industries, and you have to think about this. If you are a representative of the government or a buyer, you're using taxpayer dollars, and you are beholden to the taxpayers and to Congress to be very careful with the way you spend your money. So there's a lot of rules and restrictions on what you can do with your government funds in order to award a contract. And there's a lot of eyes watching what you're doing. So less appropriate industries include anything that's federally illegal. That might be a bit of a no-brainer, but for instance, cannabis. It's still pretty rare. I'm not really sure if there's many opportunities for cannabis on the state or even county levels in places where it's been legalized, just because it's not something the government is really going to procure a lot of if it's federally illegal. But it's also because, just things like restaurants, bars, and entertainment, well-being, holistic health, clothing retailers, and luxury items, they're just not deemed as necessary for the operation of government agencies as some of these other things. It doesn't mean they're not plenty legitimate, and you can have a lot of success with them in the private marketplace, and maybe even some in the government marketplace. They do hire caterers from time to time. They do need clothing. They need uniforms and outfits. So we're trying to be specific about saying clothing retailers. Retailers not so much. Some wholesaling and outfits and things like that, uniform services may be required. So let's talk a bit about one specific example. The point we want to make here is that even one state agency, California state agency, not even just a state agency, one part of a state agency, one location, one site that's being administered, the Pelican Bay State Prison, which is administered by the California CDCR. They procure all kinds of stuff. So look at this list. It barely fits on the page. It's really a whole city's worth of goods and services they need. So they need armory, ammunition. They need consultant services for IT and non-IT. They need construction for new things. They need couriers, electrical services, environmental lab services, housekeeping, heat and air, plumbing, all sorts of things, personal care, photocopy, USDA foods, like I mentioned before, fruits and vegetables, vending machines, water testing services. So just to take a couple samples at random, there really is a lot of opportunity. You have to find the places, the agencies, but not just the agencies, the specific part of the agencies that buy what you sell. So laser focusing in on what opportunities are out there for your business and how to get in touch with the right people who can open these doors. That is what it is really all about getting into government contracting. If you're a newbie, but also if you're more experienced as well, trying to expand your contracting potential here. Okay, so if you're brand new to the idea of government contracting, you may have heard some important terms like prime or sub. These are prime contractors and subcontractors, but maybe you don't know right off the bat what those mean. So let's go over a kind of a typical general structure for a large project. So if you are if you're a government, if you're a federal, state government, or local government, for instance, and you want to get a job done that requires thousands of hours, you're prepared to pay millions of dollars for it, you're generally going to want to go with a large business that has that capacity right off the bat, that can put thousands of hours or create thousands of units of whatever it is you need to procure, and handle the financial responsibility of $1 million contracts. Quite often, large projects go to large businesses. There's a certain sense there. But the large business there, that would be the prime contractor. The prime contractor has a direct relationship with the government agency that's awarding the RFP, or the bid of the opportunity. And so they enter into a contract. But the large business, for a number of reasons, may want to subcontract out certain part of the job. So the government agency may have some quotas for small businesses or disadvantaged business enterprises or something like that. Different sort of quotas they need reached, and they say a certain percentage of the dollar award of this contract needs to end up going to small disadvantaged businesses, TBEs, things like that. We're going to go over a little bit later. Or maybe the prime contractor, the large business, just needs some services that they don't provide. And so this is where subcontractors come in. Subcontractors have a relationship with the prime contractor. And there are tons of flow down clauses that the government issues towards the prime contractor, which are by necessity included in the contract that exists between a prime and a sub. So if you're a small business, like I assume many of you are in a small business world, typically you're going to come in on the ground floor here as a subcontractor. And so you might come into government contracting thinking, I need to find out the government agencies that I need to work for. But there's plenty of opportunity to work on large projects as a small business if you focus your marketing strategy on the prime contractor. Keep in mind, the prime contractor is a private entity like you, not a government agency. So marketing yourself to a prime contractor is a whole different animal. So this is just one model of how it works. Of course, as a small business, you can also win prime contracts. So if it's a smaller project, or depending on your size, you can respond to government opportunities and work directly with the government. That's typically what we talk about when we think of government contracting, is winning prime contracts, but we mean all of it. We mean subcontracting as well, and there's plenty of opportunity for both. Okay, forgive me, I'm getting over a little cold here if you hear me coughing every once in a while. We're going to talk about recipes for success, and this is for everything I'm going to be saying today is pretty crucial to government contracting. So, but this is a very important question. Are you ready for government contracting? As I mentioned before, it's really not for everybody. There's no reason you need to feel compelled to getting into government contracting if you're doing perfectly well in the private marketplace, and if you're not quite ready for the government. So these are some things to consider. First of all, you should have an established business. When I say that, I mean licensed, registered. Better if you're fully up and running with sales, have some clients. We're going to talk about past performance in a second, but you should be up and running. We PTAC can't really assist clients who aren't up and running already. And the reason for that is because of this. The government is not going to work with a business that isn't up and running. So that's the first one, kind of a no-brainer. The second one is a little more obscure, that you should really have a business plan that includes government contracting. So it's rare for businesses to find success in this market without being very conscientious about your strategy. So it's a lot of time and energy that goes into government contracting, and it's really good if you have a business plan that includes contracting. How is this going to fit into your overall goals as a business? How are you going to make it work financially? Speaking of finances, financial stability is a key one. I think sometimes there's a bit of misinformation, a little bit of overselling out there, especially in this age of the internet, where you may hear that if you're a struggling business, if you're struggling to make ends meet, the government has all this money that you can tap into. And the government does have all this money you can tap into, but it is sort of in a sense, it's sort of a pay to play situation, in the sense that you need enough capital to support yourself so you can do the work that the government is asking for, sometimes without being paid, for 90 days after you finish the job. And you need the equipment, the personnel, the administrative capacity to perform on these contracts. And it's bad news if you win a contract and aren't able to perform on it. So that could be sort of a very, very bad thing if you don't perform on a contract. So can you afford the investment of working on a government contract? So it's not uncommon for people to lose money on contracts, especially when they start out. So for instance, you want to bid low to be competitive, right? You're aware that your competition might be fierce and they're selling low, so you bid low. But then you might underestimate the time and the resources that it takes to administer and fulfill a contract that you win. This is not uncommon that we find people losing money on their first contract, or coming home without paying themselves after finishing a contract. And we really don't want to see that. You might also pigeonhole yourself. Let's say they call you back and they want that same price, and you say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I can't afford that. I can't afford to do that work for you at that price anymore." They may just go find someone else. So other agencies may think of what your price that you submitted as being an indication of what you can offer in the future. If you lose money on that, it might not be a good idea. So financial stability. Do you have enough money to cover yourself as you venture into this new branch of business? So that's something a lot of folks, I don't think about when they're getting into government contracting. And then keep in mind, you often don't get paid for 3 months after you finish a contract. Usually it's sooner, but it can be that long after you finish a contract. So you are kind of providing a lot of those services, a lot of the financial investment right on the upfront, and it's an investment that could pay off, but you have to ask yourself if you're ready. And as I mentioned, you will want some past performances. So government agencies, they have the ability to be pretty picky buyers. It's the government. They're paying with tax dollars, so they need to be careful what they're doing. They need to get the best value for their buck, best bang for the buck. And so if you don't have a history of sales to prove that your ability to perform on a contract, how will they be assured you're a good contractor? There's a number of ways to get around this. If you've got past performance in government contracting, that's great. If you're trying to bid on a federal contract and you have success with federal contracts, that's obviously great. You could also use, if you have a success, did you work for the Arcata City Hall? Did you work for the city of Oakland, or a county, or a local public utility? That's good. Did your business have private success before? So how many clients do you have? How much money have you made? These are all good things to indicate as well for past performance, kind of in descending order of impressiveness or importance. And if your business is kind of just up and running, just getting going, you don't have a lot of success to point to, if nothing else, you could state the experience of the members, of the founding members, of the owners, of the employees. Do they have experience in the private industry, in the market, or the government marketplace? Really anything that sort of lends credence to your company's ability to perform on a contract. So just keep in mind, the government's picky. If you were in their place, would you pick a brand new startup who hasn't proved themselves? The government is not an angel investor. They want a return on their dollar. They're going to want whatever service that they're looking for, and they're going to want it done quickly and well. So you got to play by their rules in order to win in this game. Okay, market research. Excuse me. Market research is key, and I think it's often underestimated for newbies getting into government marketplace. A lot of what you're going to be doing in your journey for government contracting is marketing yourself, and not just marketing yourself, but understanding the market you're getting into, identifying the contacts, the agencies, the units that are actually in charge of buying what you sell, identifying where the demand is and going after it, networking, understanding the system. And this is a process you can keep refining really indefinitely. We have some folks that are real experts with it that have been working with PTAC for years and years, some folks that are just getting into it. But a majority of your time will be spent trying to understand the government marketplace. Who buys what you sell? How often? Where? Is the market saturated? So for instance, think about in COVID. In the beginning, a lot of folks needed N95s. There wasn't enough of those. Everyone was scrambling to make hand sanitizer. And as a result, we had a lot of businesses popping up, offering these goods and services. It wasn't long before the market was saturated. So if the market is saturated, you're going to have a lot harder of a time making revenue off of the service. So where is the demand? Where's the need? Market research is essential for understanding all of this. And finally, you're going to want a good website in this day and age of e-commerce that demonstrates professionalism. So we'll be talking more about website later, but you could even include a tab for government contracting, specifically to appeal to government contracting officers. So that is a good idea as well. Okay, so if you've determined all of this, you feel like you're ready, you understand the lay of the land. First of all, I know, I'm a little biased, I work for PTAC, but we really are the go-to nonprofit, free, government-funded program across the whole country to help folks get into government contracting. That's why we exist. Again, we don't cost anything, we're easy to work with, we're very friendly people, and we've got a team of experts who do this for a living. So if you're looking to get in your established business in our service area, please apply for PTAC assistance. Could be us, could be your local PTAC in Sacramento or San Diego or Tennessee, I don't know. But PTACs are great service wherever they are. Identify your target audiences. So as I said about government market research, figure out who's gonna buy what you sell. If you only want to do business with local entities, it's a lot easier to do business with your local government, counties and cities and things like that. You don't really need to get registered in sam.gov. You don't need to really get registered in the DSBS. You don't need certifications like the WOSB, Small Disadvantaged Business. It couldn't hurt. It's an expenditure of your time and energy. But there are certain things, if you're getting into the local contracting, you may not need to go through all the steps of federal contracting. Which can be pretty burdensome at times. So these are free options. Everything, by the way, all sorts of certifications, procurement databases, they should all be free. So if you're getting any marketing emails telling you to pay for something, give it a close look there, because these are all free. Important to understand your target audience. Choose your NAICS and UNSPSC codes. This is basically codes that describe what your business sells. So NAICS is the North American Industry Classification System. This is the system of codes that the federal government uses, and also some local governments use NAICS codes as well. So they have that link there will have a link to the database where you can look up your NAICS code and find what's going on, what you sell there. UNSPSC codes, these are used by California as well as a lot of nations in the rest of the world. These are product service codes for the United Nations, and we also have a link there. When you get the slides, you'll receive these. And so these are really helpful for letting contractors know what you sell at a glance instead of just using words or keywords. A lot of RFPs, opportunities will be announced, and they'll have these codes listed on them. So it's a really easy way to tell, oh, this business sells what I'm looking to buy if you're a government contracting officer. Or this opportunity fits what I sell if you're the small business owner. Okay, so another step to get started, how to get registered. Get registered on Cal eProcure. This is the California state's one-stop shop for vendor procurement. You can get certified small business, disabled veteran business enterprise, or just get registered as a vendor. You can find past performance contracts. You can find open contracts. It's really helpful. We can help with that, but that's a great website to bookmark if you're looking to do business with California. You can also register on sam.gov. I mentioned it a little bit earlier. You'll get a UEI and a CAGE code, if you ever heard those terms. So if you get through the registration, a lot of changes on sam.gov this year. So certainly something that a little bit more difficult than it used to be with the new system. So if you need any help with that, just let us know. sam.gov, you need to be registered in SAM in order to do business with the federal government. And they're pretty strict about that these days, no exceptions. Even if you're a landlord renting to a federal agency, you're going to need to be registered in SAM, and that's certainly something we can help with. Complete the dynamic small business search narrative here. So this is the capability narrative, keywords, and past performance. Basically, these are just bits of information that aren't filled in your SAM registration that are ported over to a second website called the DSBS, the Dynamic Small Business Search. And this is what contracting officers use to find small businesses that sell what they need. So it's really important that you have as much information there as possible, and the SAM website doesn't add everything. So it will leave out a capability narrative, it will leave out keywords and past performance. So these are things you can go back in to the DSBS through SBA, log in, and provide these bits of information. We're going to talk about capability statements, also known as statements of qualification. This is a 1 or 2 page document that describes what you sell. It's a marketing tool. This is really important. It's something that we help our clients with all the time. And you're going to want to make sure that your website is government friendly. So we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Okay, I want to launch another poll here. Just want to kind of move quickly through this. The first question is a little hypothetical here. So in a world where price and convenience and availability of what you're trying to buy were not an issue, would you prefer to buy from a local small business rather than a large company, for instance, Amazon or Walmart? So if you didn't have to worry about cost, if your local around the corner store had what you needed, mom and pop shop, would you prefer that from Walmart or Target? So that's the first question. The options are: I'd prefer to buy from the local business, I'd still prefer to buy from the large business, or I have no preference. And the second question is, given that price, convenience, and availability are an issue sometimes in the real world here with small businesses, sometimes they don't have what you sell, sometimes you have to drive a significant distance, sometimes it costs more. How often do you guys in the audience buy from large companies like Amazon or Walmart instead of small business? So I frequently do, I sometimes do, or I pretty much always buy from small businesses. Love to hear from you in the poll here. I'm going to close it in just a couple seconds. We have a decent number of respondents here. Take an opportunity to get a drink of water. Okay. Pardon me. Okay, so I've closed the poll. I'm going to share the results. And it looks like the vast majority of you would prefer to buy from local small business, 94%. A very small number of you would still buy from the large business. There's also reasons for that. There's no judgment here. But the message is that, we would, in an ideal world, we'd like to support the small business. And many of you yourself are small business owners. So it kind of makes sense. It's a kind of a trope in American politics to say small businesses are, the backbone of the American economy. And we do love ourselves an underdog here in the United States. So I think that's kind of the sentiment behind it. But most people, everyone except one, say that they at least sometimes do purchase from a large business. And I think that's, there's a lot of reasons for that, but price and convenience and things like that do constrict us in our options. And if we want to get something done quickly, we get the right product, get it at a cheapest price, oftentimes these large businesses are the most effective. But we want to do business with a small business. And that is basically a metaphor for how it is in the government market. So that's the reason certifications exist. You imagine, instead of just me deciding that I'm going to go buy everything from Walmart or Target online, I have a friend or a significant other, in this metaphor, this would be like Congress, for instance, saying, hey, James, you can't spend all your money on that. You have to actually go into Old Town and buy some of these things. They have camping supplies here. They have groceries and food. You don't need to buy it online. And that's kind of what Congress does. Congress says, okay, so we want to support small businesses. More than that, we want to support businesses owned by people who've historically been disadvantaged in the government marketplace. So there's socioeconomic categories as well as size categories. Minority owned, women owned companies have historically held a much smaller share of contracting dollars on the federal, state, local side. So how do we distribute that? How do we help influence it so that there's more opportunity going to businesses that haven't had the same level of opportunity? And that's why certifications exist. There's size, socioeconomic certifications. There's also a certification here I'll talk about, which is based on geography. But you might notice in the state of California certifications here, we have small business, SB, small business for public works. That's just a little bit larger threshold for the small business certification. And we've got DVBE, Disabled Veteran Business Enterprise certification. They don't have any socioeconomic categories there. They just have size. That's actually because it's illegal in California to distinguish between, to have a preference based on race or gender for contracting. But that's not so for the United States federal government. So they have the small business, the small disadvantaged business, which is for women and minorities, for the SDB or economic disadvantage. They've got the WOSB or the EDWOSB, that's the woman-owned small business or the economically disadvantaged version of that. As with California, they also have a veteran-owned small business. but this is actually called the VOSB, or the Service Disabled VOSB, the SDVOSB. A lot of acronyms. It's like learning a new language. And then, as I mentioned, there's this actually geographically driven one. This is the historically underutilized business zone, or the hub zone, and this is mostly mostly rural areas, but it is also a lot of places even within a city, even within a few blocks, that have historically been at a disadvantage competing for government contracts. So government is looking to do business with a wider spread of people from different areas. So that's what the hub zone certification is about. Then there's the 8A Business Development Program. That is the SBA's minority business program. It's a very intensive program. You need at least 2 years in business and already have some success to even get in and to qualify. And then it's a 9-year program intended to turn you into a large business from a small business. So that's a great program as well. And then this one is a little bit different, a bit of an outlier, but it's the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise, or the DBE certification. And this is kind of a fusion between, it's mandated by the federal government, but then each state government administers their own system. And then you might get certification from an entity like Caltrans. And basically it's recognizing that you are a disadvantaged business, and then you might get some some set-aside contracts, some preferences, mostly when you're bidding on contracts that are getting federal dollars from the US DOT, so the Department of Transportation. So it's really useful, especially in public works and things like that, and services that support public works, bridge, road building, things like that. Okay, so certifications, you can talk all day about certifications. One thing I want to note before we move on is a lot of folks think that if you get a certification, that you're going to have success getting contracts. That is unfortunately not the case. Certifications take a lot of time and effort. If you get them, they certainly help if everything else is also working well for you. So if you've done your research, you know the opportunities, you know that there's opportunity out there for your business, and you're already having some success. Getting a certification can certainly elevate you, but it will not give you contracts if you're not already well set up to do it. So we at PTAC think local contracting is a great way to get your feet wet. We got a cute puppy to prove our point here. So local means city, county, school districts, transportation agencies, etc. And there's actually a ton more money in local contracting than in federal contracting. So even though the United States federal government is the largest buyer of goods and services in the whole world, the whole planet, there's actually more money. There's more being procured by the local entities, your cities and counties, school districts, transportation agencies, etc. The problem is that there's, of course, thousands or tens of thousands of these entities across the country, rather than just one Uncle Sam. So it can be more complicated trying to do business with the federal government in some respects, but there's only one federal government. But the benefits of local contracting is it can help you gain past performance working on smaller contracts. So if the city of Eureka, for instance, where I live, is putting out an RFP, there's going to be a lot fewer respondents on that one in a city of 25,000 people than when the federal government puts out an opportunity where 350 million people is the population of the United States, and all the large and small businesses in the country can respond to it. So there's a lower threshold for entry on like a local contracting. Typically, local agencies use their own procurement systems. You have things like Periscope, BidSync, Planet Bids. You have to sign up for them. They're going to try to get you to pay, but you usually don't have to pay in order to see the basic bid packages. And they're all different. So it's kind of the Wild West out here with local contracting. You may have to register as a vendor on a ton of different websites and navigate a lot of different procurement protocols for different agencies. That's one of the great things about the United States is we don't have one uniform way of governing. A lot of different ways that governments make things work to get what they need. Just something you should be aware of. Sometimes there's a local business preference. So for instance, San Francisco has an LBE certification. Alameda County has one too. It says, Nicole will discuss, that's an error there. It's from a previous presentation. But just be aware that sometimes there are certifications even on a local business level. So you can find this really, really helpful website here. It's our website. When we've put a web page that has a link to local agency procurement sites. So that's just one of the many resources we have on our website. Please take a look. Basically, it's going to be a list of all the counties and most of the major cities in our service area, and to their procurement portals there. So taking some of the work out of your market research there, and you can register for all of those if you'd like later today. All right, earlier when I was talking about steps for success, I talked about a capability statement. We get a lot of questions about this, something we help our clients with all the time. A capability statement is also known as a statement of qualification. Basically what it is a resume for your business. It's a one-page, front or back. In the digital age, that means it can be 2 pages. Basically it's going to be a marketing tool that describes what you sell. At a glance, it should look nice. It should serve its purpose. It should be straight to the point, and it should be easy to read. You're going to want to create multiple versions to target different agencies. So, I've reviewed a decent number of resumes in my time, and you can always tell when someone is spamming out the same resume for all kinds of different jobs. You don't want to be like that. You want to target your capability statement. If you're bidding on a state project, don't put your federal codes on there, and vice versa. If you're bidding on a federal project, you don't need to put in your UNSPSE codes and all of that. Although your past performance can be with anybody. But just trying to think strategically about how you format it and the information to include. If you'd like to learn more about this, we have a How to Write a Capability Statement webinar that Norcal PTAC put on, and we've got a page about it as well under resources on our website. So you're going to want to include a brief intro paragraph, core competencies, your differentiators, what makes you different from your competition, some key clients, past performance. So these two are very similar. You just want to kind of highlight what you've done, what's your past performance, how much have you made, things like that. Some key contracts if you have any. Maybe some biographies of owners or key personnel, codes and certifications, of course. And then naturally some contact information and your web address. And to make it look nice, you can also include some photos that you feel that represent your business. So we can help you with this. There's also a free template you can download and you just kind of adapt it to your business. And you can see what it might look like here for the capability statement. So there's a ton of free templates online. This is ours that we vetted, so feel free to use that as well. You'll get these slides later, and it'll have the hyperlink there, but it's also on our website. Okay, speaking of websites, a contracting ready website. What does that look like? Another thing we get tons of questions about. Contracting ready website means that your website is updated and relevant. It looks professional. You might have a government contracting tab specifically. You're going to want to link your capability statement as a PDF somewhere on the page. Show some of the information your capability statement is. Bring it out and show it on this government contracting page as well, like your registrations, your certifications, your codes, like your NAICS codes, your UNSPSE codes, etc. Some most recent projects, past performance and history, and make it all easy to navigate. So I'm going to show you some examples here. Examples are always helpful. I have a link here, admiralsexperience.com. This is just one consultancy, but they had a nice government contracting tab. They had a company overview specifically geared towards contracting. So remember, everything you're doing with contracting, you can't approach it in the same way that you do it with the private industry. Your summary of what you do, what your government is, might be really different when you're talking to a contracting officer than when you're talking from a private client. So current and previous contracts, and then down below, if you scroll down, they have a nice hyperlinked capability statement, so you can download that too. Here's another example, MackenziePlus.com. They've got some logos from past government agencies, also some private entities they work with, but you can see just at a glance who they've done business with, and it's great. It looks very impressive. Oh, okay, they've worked with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. That's great. They've also put that they have a GSA contract. We're not going to get into what that is, but basically it's a great contract vehicle to get onto, where it makes it easy for the federal government and other folks to buy what you sell. They've also put their NAICS codes to describe what they sell along with the description. So it's really helpful. They've laid it out nicely just as an example. Okay, and as I mentioned, it's a very crucial step to do marketing, to market to the government, not just to understand the market, but to actually develop a plan for marketing yourself. So target agencies and primes. So don't forget, you can also work as a subcontractor. You're targeting primes, not just governments, but private entities who buy what you sell. So you need to find out who buys what you sell and go after them. You can network with government agencies, prime contractors, or even other small businesses if you want to get into teaming agreements, joint ventures, things like that we don't have time to discuss in detail. But nobody is not a resource. So think strategically about who you might partner with, who you might work with. Of course, establish relationships. So behind all of the red tape, the government procurement websites, all of that, it's humans buying things from other humans. And the power of phone call, a handshake, some eye contact has never gone away. Even emails, things like that are still helpful for establishing relationships. Build rapport, stay in contact with folks. It really is important in this day and age still, who you know and how you develop those relationships over time. Towards that end, it's a really good idea to attend any expos, matchmakers, conferences, things like that are relevant for your industry. So we always put our partners' events as well as our own events on our webpage. We want you to take a look at our calendar, see if anything that's coming up. If we hear of any matchmakers and expos that we think are relevant for our clients in our service area, we'll put it there. And attend just anything you find out about. So maybe word of mouth, or do some Google research, find out what's going on in your industry that you might be able to join in on. So participate in trainings. Again, we are putting on trainings. Our website's going to be a nice resource for that. If you do LinkedIn, that's a great idea. Focus on social media, reach out. Government contractors, contracting officers are on LinkedIn. So you can actually talk to agency representatives and promote yourself there. Small business reps. There's tons of people whose entire job is to establish these relationships as well. So they're looking for you, they're incentivized to work with small businesses, and you're looking for them. So find out who your small business representatives are, reach out to them, send your capability statement, establish that relationship. And then, as I mentioned before, dynamic small business search is that DSBS. It's a portal that contracting officers use to find small businesses. So you'll want to update that as well. Okay, real briefly, I'm just going to talk about where to find opportunities. You'll have these links later. Like I mentioned, government agency, local agency websites, procurement pages, prime contractor websites. So find out what kind of prime contractors are winning contracts in your area. Cal eProcure, as I mentioned, California's one-stop shop. Click on events and you'll find the open opportunities. SAM.gov, System for Award Management. It's not just where you register as a bidder and get SB certified, it's also where you will find contracts. So that's a good idea. You also get those in your bid match if you're a PTAC client. Acquisition.gov is a really helpful procurement website for understanding forecasts, like what is the government going to buy, and so when can I focus my efforts, which agencies are going to buy what and when. Associations like builders exchanges, they often post construction opportunities like that, and of course our bid matching service. So I know we've gone through a lot of stuff pretty quickly. These intro presentations do move fast. Our idea is to kind of give you a general overview. You can review the slides, you can review the video, and most importantly, you can reach out to your PTAC and try to get help with them to go into a little more of what we've talked about today. But here are your 10 steps for success. 1, determine if you're ready for contracting. We talked about that. Apply for PTAC services. If you do feel like you're ready, complete the Getting Started checklist on our website. You can find it on our website. Get certified for anything you're eligible for. If you're eligible for it, create your capability statement, update your website, make sure that website's looking nice. Network, build relationships, market your business, then locate those bid opportunities, bid on them, and very few people win their first contract, their first bid. So the name of the game is really trying and failing and trying again until you win something. And that's what we're all about. We want to see you succeed. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to have some time for questions today. And this is just a little snapshot of our team of procurement specialists. And we really do want to see you succeed. That's what we're all about. If you're looking to get into government contracting with federal government, and you're in the IT field, you may want to do business with the Defense Microelectronics Activity, the DMEA. Next Thursday, December 15th, 10 a.m., same time. Please join us for another free webinar. Okay, let's dive into the Q&A time. We may go a little bit over time. It is just about 2 minutes to 11 right now. So if you do have to leave, just note you'll be redirected towards a satisfaction survey. Just let us know how you felt about the webinar today. And as I've mentioned a number of times, you'll be getting the slides as well as the video recording. So if you miss the Q&A, you'll have a chance to review the video afterwards. But let's go ahead and give some time to the questions that we do have now. Amanda, do you want to rig those up?
Absolutely. So we have a first question asking specifically about any special methods or practices with working with the Veterans Affairs Office.
Yeah, so working with the VA, that's certainly something we can help our clients with. I don't have any specific tips. It's a good question. You will want to do a decent amount of research on any government agency that you're working with. Maybe even talk to other small businesses who have worked with them as well. But apply for PTAC, and we can assist you, or your local PTAC can assist you to really dig in and find the contacts you need to talk to with the VA. I know the VA has a lot of different procurement protocols and ways that they procure what they need for our soldiers. So that's a great question, and I would advise you to work with your local PTAC to find out more about it.
Absolutely. And then we had a specific question about opportunities in audio-visual services, which I know I've seen a few solicitations for, but not very common.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be something that's, we wouldn't say steer clear of contracting. You're not going to have any opportunity, but not something that's as commonly procured. But I would say that there is opportunity for that. So, and you're asking for Nina's contact information. I'm not sure which Nina you're referring to. If there is a Nina, I'm not sure if Nina Martinez is here. Oh yeah, this
Yeah, it's
Nina
Nina Martinez.
Okay, great. I think Nina has posted her email address in the past. Nina joins our webinars all the time, so.
Yeah, and I actually went ahead and sent them the website for the contracting office that she works under so they can connect with the office.
Oh, that's great. Okay, thank you so much.
Of course.
So yeah, industry specific questions about audio visual, those are great questions. I totally understand. What you can do is look through the procurement databases, try to find what's already been awarded. You can use that by identifying your NAICS code, your UNSPSC codes, finding how to describe. The first step is how to talk about what you sell. Use the right keywords and the right codes. And then you can go into these government portals, and a lot of them are just quite open. Anybody can look at them and find, for instance, usaspending.gov, and go in and find what's been awarded in the past. And once you have some information about that, you can reach out to those agencies and make introductions and send your capability statement. So understanding what's been awarded in the past is a key step for success for understanding how to proceed in the future. And Norcal PTAC, I didn't talk much about this, but we have a platform called GovSpend that we actually pay for, and then we can help you. We can sit down in a session and do market research with you, zero in on what's been bought already that you sell, and then send you a spreadsheet that has all sorts of information, not just on the dollar amounts and the sort of time when it's been bought and by who, but really even contact information like email addresses and things like that. This is for state, local, federal, you name it, all kinds of research there. So for audiovisual, I would recommend getting into the market research pretty deep, and we can certainly help you with that at PTAC.
Awesome. And then we have one last question. What kind of advice would you give to someone who's maybe acquiring a company that already has a government contract?
So I assume you mean if you're in the middle of a government contract.
A change in ownership where the company that they are now purchasing has a government contract already in place.
Yeah, so I mean, as far as a couple different answers that are possible there, as far as past performance, if it's your company, if it's the same capacity, the same employees, facilities, you can certainly leverage that past performance as you go on and continue working with the government. So certainly utilize that past performance. If you acquire a company, part of what you're acquiring is their customer base and their reputation. So certainly take advantage of that. As far as continuity working with the government, I would talk with your contracting officers if you're in the middle of a contract about how to ensure continuity. Make sure you understand what sort of obligations that the company is already in to cover yourself. You may want to speak with a contracting lawyer. They have boutique law firms that focus on contract specializing. So that does sound like it might be a complicated situation if you're stepping into a pre-existing contract. If you are if you don't have a contract that's ongoing, but you're just kind of wondering about how to proceed, well, I would say if that company has success with the government marketplace, first thing would be to understand what they did right and to understand how to continue what they're doing. Talk to the employees, do some research, and again, talk to your procurement specialists as well about that.
Fantastic. And then I believe that is it.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Just one more note: you're going to be receiving the slides as well as the video presentation later. So please take a look at those if you'd like. Feel free to give us a call. Our number and our email are on the page there. Go to our website, check it out. There's a ton on our website under the resources tabs that we didn't even have time to go over today. So if this has been enough to pique your interest, you want to learn more, check out our website, apply for services, and we hope to hear from you soon. So thanks so much, everyone.